Hey guys, I'm Nate. Welcome back to the workshop. Today we've got another fun project for you. In the past we've had several experiments where we made molds of organic things and then cast them in candy. We've got one more of those that we want to try today. I have here a cooked red lobster tail. We're going to see if we can melt down some Swedish fish, cast it in that mold, and make a gummy red candied lobster tail. The first step is to build a box that we can pour our lobster tail mold in. There we go, we've got the walls of our box built from some Lego, but to make sure that they're completely watertight or silicone tight, let's just line the sides with tape a little bit. There we go, that looks pretty good, I think. One more step before we start prepping our silicone. We've had a couple of problems in the past with some of the things we're trying to mold floating up inside the silicone. So let's make a couple of small holes in the base of our Lego plate and then run some screws through the Lego plate into the lobster tail. All right, I think that's done a pretty good job. Our lobster tail feels like it's fairly well in place. Now, of course, the screws sticking out the bottom have made it so it doesn't sit level. So let's just add a couple of feet on the bottom. They won't fit into plate on this plate, but let's use a few bricks, spread them out, and then we can set our mold on top of those bricks. There we go, that's sitting nice and level. Our next step is to mix up a good-sized batch of silicone that can completely cover this lobster tail. We've got some nice bright yellow catalyst here, and we need to mix it at a 10:1 ratio. So if we have 20 ounces of our silicone, then we need 2 ounces of our catalyst. There's 2, and let's just go a little bit more because we had a little over 20 ounces of our silicone. Looks kind of like a giant fried egg in there. Now we just get to stir all of our silicone and catalyst until it is nice and evenly mixed, and then we'll throw it in the vacuum chamber and pull out all of the bubbles. All right, let's start pulling a vacuum. There it goes. Here we go. All right, there we go. We've got our silicone poured. It's mostly bubble free. Now we just need to let our mold sit for a few hours until it's completely cured. All right, our silicone mold has now had several hours to cure and it is nice and rigid. It started pushing the tape out on one side, but it didn't spill over anywhere. So I think we are good, and I think it's time to start pulling this mold apart and see how it turned out. Well, that's a good texture. We can see the little bits and edges of the lobster where it was basically in contact with the plate. Yeah, see, this is the annoying part, is the bricks come apart from each other, but then they're stuck to the tape on the sidewall. There we go. Lego brick walls are free. Just trim off a little bit of extra spilled over silicone here and there. There we go, we've got our block mold. Now we just need to free the lobster tail from within. Well, we can see the inside of some lobster tail in there. Just cracking parts of the shell. I have already accepted the fact that to get this out, we're probably going to have to break the lobster tail into a lot of pieces. But that's all right. We should still have our mold. Oh. That does not smell really great. It's a powerful fish smell. Oh, there we go. All these little pieces that angle down like that, those are what are really digging into the silicone. Pull them out. Oof. There we go. I think at this point we've got most of the lobster tail out of the mold. We had to cut parts of the mold open where there were long, reaching bits of the tail, but I think we've gotten all of it out, and at this point we just need to wash it to try and get rid of some of that day-old lobster smell. That's really not a pleasant smell at this point. Let's try and see how well we can wash this. There we go. I think we've got our mold pretty well cleaned out at this point. It doesn't have much in the way of a pour spout, so let's cut a couple of holes into the bottom of our mold that will let us pour our liquid candy down inside. There we have it. With our mold prepped, it's time to start melting down our Swedish fish into a liquid that we can pour down into our mold. There we go. We've got some Swedish fish in a saucepan. Let's add some heat and try and melt these things. These don't really seem to be liquefying the way I was expecting them to. They're staying very stringy, and like there's no puddle forming on the bottom. It's just looking kind of like melting plastic. I'll let it go for a little longer and see what happens. All right, so Swedish fish apparently don't liquefy when you heat them up. They just turn into a gross, bubbly, burning gelatin mess. I don't think I'd be able to get this down inside the mold if I tried. So we're gonna have to move on to plan B. We have a Jell-O candy recipe that we've used several times in the past. We're gonna try a slight variation on that. I still want to get the red outside of our shell, but instead of just casting the whole thing in a red gummy, we're going to try using some red chocolate to make a nice thin coat on the outside of our shell, and then we'll fill the rest of it with our gummy recipe. We want it to be white, so I found some clear gelatin, and after we've mixed it all up, I'll try adding a little bit of marshmallow cream to make it the opaque white color that we're going for. First, of course, let's melt our chocolate. All right, we've got our chocolate. It's warm and melted in the bag. Let's try and squirt some down into our mold. Hopefully we can get a nice even coating on the inside, and then pour out the extra if there is any. Just try and make sure it gets all the way down into the little tail bits. Let's just see if there's any extra that wants to shake out. There we go. That looks like it's pretty well coated on the inside with our chocolate, but there's still plenty of hollow in there for our gummy candy to finish it off. There we go, we've got our chocolate coating the inside of our lobster tail mold. Now let's pop this into the freezer to cool down and solidify while we make our gummy recipe. Let's start with half of a cup of cold water and then add 1/4 cup of corn syrup. Now let's mix this until all of our corn syrup is nicely dissolved into the water. We'll know it's ready when the mixture is completely clear and has no more cloudiness to it. With our corn syrup dissolved, now let's add 2 packets of gelatin powder into the water. Remember that at this stage, we haven't added any heat yet. This is still quite cold. With our gelatin all mixed into our liquid, let's add a little bit of heat and stir every minute or two to be sure everything stays evenly mixed. There we go. I think our gelatinous mixture is all ready to go. So let's take it off the heat and then add a little bit of our marshmallow cream. Now I've never done this before, so I'm just kind of guessing on how much to add. Hopefully it melts in nicely. We definitely have a good opaque, slightly off-white color. I'm thinking that actually looks pretty darn close to the color of the inside of a lobster. Let's try pouring this into our mold, and hopefully it won't completely melt the shell that we've already poured. Chocolate feels pretty nice and solid. I think it's cooled off pretty well inside of the mold. Let's see if we can pour in this gelatin. All right, I think that's full. Now let's let that cool and then we'll try and demold this sucker. There we go, we've let the candy cool down inside of our mold for several hours now, so it's time to see if we can pull this thing out in one piece. Wow, the silicone's almost healed itself back together. I'm seeing some good results, but I think I'm also getting some cracking chocolate. As long as it's held together in the long term, like if it's stuck to the candy well, then I'm not too worried. This is all a bit of an experiment. Well, we've got some cracking and breaking there. The chocolate may not have flowed very nicely into the very thin parts of this mold. Oh no! We are de-shelling our lobster tail. The chocolate seems to stick fairly well to the silicone, more than I was hoping. Lobster puzzle here. I don't think I'm good enough at solving puzzles to fit all these pieces back on. I have a feeling I know how this is going to go, but let's see if we can get it out of the other side any better. Yeah, got a pretty good interior lobster. Unfortunately, our shell does not like to participate at all. Well, the inside of our lobster tail is looking pretty great. The outside of our lobster tail really does not want to turn out very well. It's sticking to the mold more than just about anything I've ever seen stick to the mold. Well, making a red shell over our white inside didn't really work. The red shell wasn't strong enough to survive being demolded. So I do want to try making a pure gummy lobster tail. So let's mix up another batch of our gummy recipe pretty quick, try pouring that in here, and let's see what happens when that sets. Our mold is filled. It has the two different layers with the red and the white gummy. Now hopefully when we let this cool down, it will solidify into one beautiful lobster tail that has a red outside and a white inside. There we go. What is hopefully our final gummy test has solidified, and now it's time to try and take it out and see if we manage to keep those layers of the top red and the inner white. Oh, I'm seeing good things. Aha. Yes. Ah, there we go. A lobster tail made of gummy candy. We don't have the perfect separation between the red layer and the white layer. It looks like some of it managed to dissolve its way through in some spots. And of course, there's a little bit of red that's bled onto the bottom. But for the most part, this is looking like a lobster tail. We do have the red outside. We do have the white inside. That is what we want. Right now I'm just cutting off the pore spouts because, as I may have mentioned before, real lobsters do not have pore spouts. I don't want to set unrealistic expectations for all the other lobster out there. You're beautiful the way you are. You don't need a pore spout. And just to try and match the look of the real lobster tail a little bit more, I'm taking a little bit of food coloring and a bamboo skewer and just painting on some details. At this point, I would say there's only one step left to try, and that is eating it. All right, I think you're supposed to split lobster using the knife to crack it down. I don't know. That's the official way right there. Here's our cross section. Some of the red definitely bled through all of the white. We have almost a gradient, but you can see the different layer. This is our red layer, separating just a little bit from our not so white layer. And now to eat our lobster. This is gonna turn my mouth so red because I painted on it with food coloring. All right, let's see how this goes. That is really, really sweet and a really weird texture. I think adding the marshmallow cream introduces a lot more air into this, because usually with this gummy candy recipe, it's just kind of like a gummy candy. This is more like candy styrofoam. It's edible, but I wouldn't recommend it. Not my favorite candy we've ever made, but one of my favorite looking candy things we've ever made. There you have it, molding a lobster tail and casting it in gummy candy. We had a few hiccups along the way. Our Swedish fish did not work. Our chocolate with the gummy core didn't really work since our chocolate broke off and didn't stick to the gummy at all. But eventually we did get a red outside and a white inside, all made of gummy candy, which looked really good, especially after painting it with a little bit of food coloring. Thanks for joining us for this video today, and remember to come grab your hats, shirts, and other cool merchandise at thekingofrandom.com. See you there. Lobster, not just for New England. Doesn't even make sense to eat lobster all over. Oh, now a lobster tail is edible. Who'd have thought? You couldn't eat them before. Oh wait, you can.